and welcome back to the OnlyAccies podcast. It has been a while since we've done one of these, so there is plenty to get through. But before we do any of that, Brandon, happy birthday, sir.
Thank you very much.
Happy birthday, Merry Christmas. Did you do anything fun for Christmas?
Nope, absolute hee-haw. Got past Christmas Day and I've pretty much been on my deathbed ever since, so just the usual. What about yourself?
Just every weekend, isn't it? It's the same as every weekend. So we do have plenty to get through, like I said. There was obviously a massive letter, a statement, whatever you want to call it, from Colin McGowan. Our SLO has responded. There's been plenty of games since then, 6 games to cover as well. We'll also be looking at who is out injured and who is out isolating with COVID-19. So how important is that going to be for the next 2 games, St Johnstone and, of course, the derby on Saturday against Motherwell. And then we've got plenty of fan questions submitted by yourself at the end to cover as well. So let's just jump straight in. The biggest news since we've last been here is Mr. Colin McGowan, our wonderful CEO, has released a statement, a letter, whatever you want to call it, begging South Lanarkshire Council to continue their rent inside the stadium. He also said that if they don't, he's asking for £300,000 as a goodwill gesture. He also makes out in the letter that the club maybe isn't as financially stable as we all think it is. The club then claimed just afterwards, after it got plenty of flack online, that it was actually a draft letter and it wasn't meant to be posted. Colin McGowan then went on George Galloway, who of course got a lot of attention midweek on Twitter.
The Catman.
The Catman. He went on his radio station claiming that it wasn't a draft, it was meant to be posted. So what's happened there? Where's the confusion there, Brandon? It's a draft letter, it's not a draft letter. It's meant to be...
it was meant to be posted. It just obviously didn't proofread it like you're meant to if you're going to post something as outrageous as that. So I think when they've realised the flack they've got for it and they've realised some of the spelling mistakes and grammar errors, that's when they've obviously just thought, oh, we're just going to claim this was a mistake. It was just a bit of a shambles, to say the least. I think the whole thing with Queen of the South shines a wee bit of a light on it because it shows that there's clubs maybe a bit worse than us with regards to statements. But at the end of the day, no, it was just to post that pretty much begging, pleading for money. It just shows how desperate you need to be. But clarity was shown with as he made sure it was pointed out, HAFC CEO. Had to clarify that because obviously the spelling error was made the first time, so I think that's what the clarity's been constantly posted. It's a sort of slight dig at the fans with that. He's pretty much says no, there's no sort of money issues, but then he went on to talking about James MacArthur, Brian Easton, just the usual sort of players, as if we didn't know this information, and it really didn't clear up the whole point of the SLO's letter was to be sort of, what's the best way to say it, sort of, because there's such discontent with the fans and how far apart both the fans and the club seem at the present moment, so the SLO was trying to get a bit of clarity on that and hopefully try and build some bridges, but there was nothing done with it, in my opinion anyway.
No, I absolutely agree. I tweeted as well after it that the letter, and I know you tweeted after it as well, that the letter, the response to the SLO statement didn't really settle my nerves in terms of the financial stability. He basically said, don't worry, everything's fine, don't worry, go away. Like, I didn't feel better after it. It covered, like you said, 0 of the original questions that they asked. They didn't obviously help. They didn't obviously help themselves, where after the statement, after they said it was a draft, that they put up this tweet thanking the fans for spell checking and for spell checking the statement. And that's one of those ones where we spoke about this of the podcast, where that's so missing the mark in terms of, like, I thought initially they were just trying to be funny and trying to make a laugh of it, but then you do realise that it is a dig, it's a serious dig at fans, and they do not help themselves.
And this is where your head of communications, head of media, that's what you're in that role for. This is where you need to be in a bit of authority, say, listen, that's a no-go. That's not good. You cannot post that. That is not going to end well at all. But I suppose then that leads you to the argument that people are just certain puppets, if you will, because that shouldn't be happening at all. Any sort of football club, if you've got any sort of education or degree, or what, not even a degree, just common sense, you know, we're a professional football club. You can't post stuff like that and respond to fans in certain manners. And I think it also makes the argument with regards to the SLO letter, the fact that there was no follow-up at all, and there was no sort of questioning whether the answer wasn't there to what the whole point was. People have argued that it could be seen that the SLO letter was a sort of, what's the best word? It was a setup, if you will. It was to work in McGowan's hands. McGowan already had his answers, if you will, and it was a sort of quite a sneaky way to make them seem as if they were actually answering something for the fans when they didn't answer anything, really.
Yeah. Now, obviously, we don't know about that, but it seemed that way, I think, to a fair few people, because the SLO letter obviously came very quickly afterwards. And I think that from a kind of an outside perspective, taking the letter as it is, I thought it was all right. He asked appropriate questions. I had no problem with it. But yeah, like you said, the way the response came, it did seem a little bit set up. But again, we don't know that.
Premeditated. Yeah. But that's just, people will argue that it was, people argue it wasn't. It's all about opinions at the end of the day, isn't it? And it would have been good to have some more clarity on it afterwards, and because for the Christmas period, time to be merry and jolly, and it couldn't be any far apart for the club and the fans still. You've got Accies fans waiting up with pencil cases for Christmas, do you know what I mean?
I was going to ask, did you buy anything from the club shop?
Didn't get anything. I don't think my girlfriend thought a water bottle or a pencil case or an
iPhone 6 phone.
iPhone 6 cheap £1 phone cover would have sufficed for my present. So no, I didn't get anything Accies related, unfortunately.
See, last time I was in the club shop, it was a while ago now, obviously. There was a selection of mugs, and it was like Thomas Cherney.
I remember them.
I was like, mate, and it was like not even like good photos. It was
graphically designed by a 6-year-old. Honestly, man.
Shocking, man. Anyway, and just on a side note, before we go into talking about the football, they mentioned in the statement that the Panto had 160 viewers, or 160 people subscribed, and that would
I said it's making 36 grand.
Right, so that would then make £1,600, right? Now, people may not know this. I am an actor, right, and I have done panto, right. £1,600 will not cover the actors.
Of course it won't.
Like, listen, I know it was only one show. I get that, but from my experience, you need to be paid for the rehearsals, which we know there was plenty of. They need to pay, obviously, the actors, the crew, the director, the producers. So that £1,600 made, I can guarantee you, did not cover everything. Unless these people are working for free, and I know actors, we do not work for free.
Well, they've said after that, they then says thanks to everyone that made 36 grand, which I don't have a clue how they've went for 1,600 to 36 grand in 2 days. But the way in which they publicised the panto and how they were letting it out in the media has been night and day compared to anything they do with the football club. So it wouldn't surprise me if they actually made that amount, but it just made no sense to me, the fact that they've said 1,600 and then all of a sudden they came out with a statement after to say 36 grand. So
I'm just looking at it there. It says the pantomime was streamed live from the stage alongside our festive attraction with Santa, and the life-size nativity scene raised £35,000.
Which it doesn't surprise me. It did make that amount because of how well it was publicised. Any shop I went in Hamilton, there was leaflets about it. Everywhere I looked in Facebook, that's all you saw. I had an old man calling me very derogatory comments on Facebook. Never heard of the guy in my life. Never saw him at an Accies game in my life, and he was calling me poison, venomous, all these horrible names. So I says to the old fellow, I'll happily have a socially distant conversation with him about everything Accies, since he couldn't even spell academical right. But it's just unfortunate that there's this sort of massive divide between what is seen as the football club and the charity side of things, because I would love to get involved with lots of things football charity orientated, as I know there's so many Accies fans
Yep.
that already do charity work, and because the football club and the charity side are seen to be two different entities, and the charity's meant to be this big bad person because the way Colin McGowan differentiates them for us in the football club, it's unfortunate because I think charity-wise, if they entice the fans to get more involved, it would be even more leaps and bounds compared to what it is. If they built the bridges with the fans with regards to the actual football club first, then I don't think any football Accies fan would have any qualms to get involved charity-wise. I'd more than happily go and do food banks, collections, whatever, to help charity, no matter what. But the club need to sort of stop that sort of difference, which
Hmm.
is meant to be seen as the club and the charity. It should all be as one.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'm the same as you. I would not have any problems going down and helping out. But again, they need to build that bridge across. I also think if they put, we've said this before in the podcast, if they put 10% of the effort in, they did to promote
Aye, if
the
they put,
panel and all the other stuff into the football
and
club, you never know
that's
what
what
would
people
happen.
have. People have no issue with charity whatsoever. If you
No.
have any issue with charity, you're a sad person.
Yep.
Um, some of us can be negative a lot, some of us can be money bastards, which I know myself, I'm very money, but it is in no way relation to what they do for charity. It's more so the fact that the effort is not to be seen anywhere near as close as what it is for the football.
Yep.
And that's the only thing we're annoyed about. It's nothing to do with what they do for charity, because anything to help anybody less fortunate is brilliant, and hats off to them for that.
Absolutely. We'll move on from that and we'll focus on the football. The whole reason we're here. Since the last time we did this panel, we played 6 games. We won 2, drawn 1, and lost 3. We had some good wins, maybe not good performances, but good results against Kilmarnock and Ross County. We lost to Hibs, Livy, and Celtic, and then drew 1 each to Aberdeen. Now, what a lot of fans have been saying online is, and I can't help but agree, is that yes, those 2 wins against Killie and Ross County, they may have been good results, but the performances were still nowhere near good enough. And the wins papered over cracks. And you see that quite a lot, I think, at Hamilton. You know, we're doing a really bad run. We get 1 win, everything's rosy. There's videos and photos getting posted on Twitter. Everything's all good and gold. Then we go to the next game and lose 4-0 to Hibs. It papered over cracks, and I think fans were right to kind of call out myself and say that getting a little bit ahead of yourself. You know, good win against Ross County, we needed it, but they are the worst team in the league. And we need to be careful what's going to come next. And obviously, what came next was losses to Hibs and Livy. What did you make of the performances? Even though the results were good, the performances.
Performances weren't spectacular, or anything fairly decent, to be honest with you. When you look at our 2 wins, there's no point in. We'll just talk about the wins first of all. So,
Yeah.
Kilmarnock were playing majority match against 10 men. They still had a lot of chances. They could have easily have scored on another day. That's a draw or even a Kilmarnock win. We win against 10 men with a penalty. Barely threatening them, to be honest with you, if we're being honest. Don't get me wrong, it's leaps and bounds compared to what we had been the past couple of months, so that's where credit had to be given, because we weren't getting absolutely pumped, essentially, but the performances were still fairly non-existent. We drew with a very, very poor Aberdeen, so it started off with a very poor, against a very poor Aberdeen side that we drew against, which Aberdeen were woeful.
Yeah.
They had a really bad run. Second half, we came out. We showed a bit of fight that we hadn't seen in a while, which was credit where credit's due. But ability and performance, it's nothing that you should be so overjoyed with, because they weren't in spectacular. We then beat Kilmarnock. People will say, "Oh, it's paper on the cards." It says you're still getting the points, I suppose. At the end of the day, you're still getting the points, and don't get me wrong, the performance wasn't spectacular and it wasn't great to watch. It's not easy now, but compared to what they were of the weeks before, it was leaps and bounds. After the Kilmarnock win, which, as I says, we've beat 10 men with a penalty and we've barely threatened them when they've had 10 men as well. We've still got the win, I suppose, but it's no pretty nigh. Normal service sort of resumed when we were playing. And don't get me wrong, Hibs are probably the third best team in that league. I didn't expect anything out of that game. You just thought after you've came and got 4 points in your last two and you've got the 3 points which have been taken off us again for the time being against St Mirren, you'd think they'd have a sort of bit of spring in their step and they'd be playing with a bit more confidence, but it was just the old Accies of the start of the season. Big massive gaps between midfield and forwards, big massive gaps between midfield and defence, which we thought we evened out for the past couple of games, which were more relevant. Hibs took advantage of that, and it could have been about 10 if we're being honest with you. So people could say it papered over the cracks, and rightly so, because it was just back to normality. We went to Ross County, who we've won 2-0. You look at the stats though, and it was a Mourinho masterclass. How it was as if it was Spurs away to Liverpool and Spurs 30% possession and managing to get a 2-0 win. It was just a sheer boring. Accies, how the fuck we've won it 2-0, I don't have a clue. They've had chances because they hadn't won in so long. Their confidence was completely dead and buried. If they had a bit of confidence about them, they'd have won that game. But we've won the game, so we can't really.
No.
I know it's easy enough to be very doom and gloom all the time when you're getting beat, but when you do win a game, Accies fans do tend to always try and find the sort of negatives out the win, and I suppose we didn't deserve to win the game, but we did win it, so there's no point in.
This is where I agree. I absolutely agree with you. You know, it's 3 points at the end of the day. Who cares? You know what I mean? That's what's important. But I can also see where the other fans are coming from in terms of the fans who are adamant that Brian Rice is not the man to do it, and they're coming out and saying it is papering over cracks, and let's not get ahead of ourselves.
And don't get me wrong, when we do win a game, which is very, very rarely, Accies fans have got every right to go mental and post absolute ridiculous things like we do on Twitter, i.e. Brian Jose Mourinho Rice. That doesn't for a second make me think that we aren't papering over cracks with these sort of wins. That makes me, because we get 1-1 in a blue moon, I've got every right to go on a wee bit of a bender and post absolute shite on Twitter, which majority of Accies fans do. But that doesn't for a second make me not believe that these wins aren't papering over cracks and the performances are still diabolical to a level.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the fans, this kind of ties in with this, one of the fans asked us, or one of the listeners on Facebook asked us about how important Ross Callahan is. Now, obviously, he's out injured at the moment, but how important he's been to the last performances. I think somebody said on the comms that in the last 6 goals, he's been involved in 5 of them, either scoring or assisting. So you see how important he is. But it does tie into the fact that in the last 2 games with Celtic and Livingston, we didn't have a single touch in the opposition box, and most times not having a shot. Where do you think that comes from? Do you think that comes from the quality of player, or the fact that we're missing people like Callahan and that to kind of create those chances?
I think we went through a period where we were getting absolute pumped and we were scoring goals just because the game was already dead and buried, so we were obviously going to have more attack at them, but our sort of game plan completely changed, and Rice changed it to make us more compact and get on the counter, and we were only going to have a very small handful of chances, and we had to take them. You take a few players out, and the ability drops as well with who you bring in, and they don't have a clue how to work under the game plan that's in place. Ross Callahan, when we first signed him, I remember doing the podcast. I actually watched over it when somebody made that comment, and I remember saying he's going to be he's not, out of all the signings we did make, he's the one I was most keen about, because I remember watching him as a young player with Rafe and Hearts, and there was something about him, and he was unfortunate with injuries. He seemed to be kicking on with us after a few with a run in the team, and he was the player that was sort of giving us that dimension between midfield and attack. Because let's be honest, midfield to attack this season has been absolutely horrendous. And he was that sort of dimension of going forward in within the midfield, and who we've replaced him in the past couple of games with. We clearly have been missing him. It doesn't matter if his goals have came from penalties or if he's been scoring outside the box, etc. That sort of dimension of us going forward is completely non-existent without Callahan being there, because we just don't know what to do and the ability's not there as well.
See, Matt, what I've got noted down is I think that formation change into being more compact and hitting the counter has helped Callahan a lot. When he first came in, he was sitting deep with Scott Martin, and we said at the time, remember, that they're both running about like headless chickens. Both want to go and press high. They both want to go and chase balls, but that then leaves obviously huge gaps.
That leaves the big massive gaps, exactly.
Exactly. So having this change of formation allows a Dolphin to sit deep and allows Callahan to then go push forward, which has helped his game. So even though I think we have sacrificed, I don't want to say attacking threat because we never had much, but even though we have sacrificed that to be more defensive, I think it has helped people like Ross Callahan come into the games more, and ultimately has helped us more with him scoring more goals.
Because it gives a different avenue and a different option for players to go and give a different dynamic to their game, rather than just running about like heedless chasing spaces that aren't even there. We're not for a second saying that Ross Callahan Ballon d'Or is not the GOAT, if you will. But with the options that we've got, he is obviously the best option within the sort of midfield to attack, sort of going forward for it. Aye.
And he's not the only one, obviously. I don't want to sound like David. I don't want to sound like Brian Rice here. But we are missing a lot of first team players out on the injured list. Obviously, long term, David Templeton, Lewis Smith, Will Collar. You know what's going on with Will Collar. Sean Want, Marius Ogumpo, Scott Martin, who we, from what I kind of read midweek, he doesn't seem as if he's far off coming back. Scott Martin. As far as I'm aware, the injury he picked up against Ross County when he scored his goal.
I'm surprised that player hasn't get any repercussions, because that was a dirty bastard move what that player's done when we've scored the goal. That was shocking. He should get a ban for that, in my opinion. That is my opinion. I was fucking raging when I saw that.
But from what I heard, that Scott Martin, apparently the injury is not as bad as it looks, and maybe he'll be one of the players back for Saturday. And obviously on the COVID list, we've got Nathan Thomas, Ross Callahan, and Callum Smith all isolating. As far as we're aware, none of them have tested positive. They just have to isolate because they've been in contact. And again, I don't want to sound like Brian Rice, but those are pretty much all of them are first team players, bar Callum Smith, are first team players that you would expect to be in the team. They were hearing that the COVID players, Nathan Thomas, Ross Callahan, and Cam Smith, should be back for Saturday against Motherwell, which will obviously be big inclusions. Hopefully Scott Martin's with them. But
I asked the question and I was told Wednesday, so tomorrow. But obviously they've been out for so long, so you'd imagine that you'd think the Motherwell game would be when they're back for. And when you say like sounding like Brian Rice, I totally understand what he's saying, because as a lot of players to have out injured. But then that leads you to the point, well, this was always a possibility of happening. We always knew this was going to happen with Temps. We always knew this could happen with other players. Why not make your squad more better in depth? Which we simply don't have, and that's why we're in the position we do, because the squad depth is diabolical. Even the first team players we have aren't of a certain calibre of what we've been known to have before and been not very appreciative of. So we really should have recruited better, and that is Rice's fault. Rice is a person that's brought in these players, so if he was going to have to only work with a certain amount, he should have recruited better. Yeah,
I absolutely agree. I think that, again, I don't want to sound like the club are making really horrible excuses, but obviously financial burdens obviously are a problem. But I do agree. I think when we lose people like Ross Callahan and Scott Martin, you're looking at the bench and it's Ronan Hughes and Charlie Trafford. You're kind of, Accies fans are obviously going, fucking hell, like lining up. I know. Obviously, people said that as soon as they saw the lineup for Celtic, and it was Ronan Hughes and that playing, you were thinking, I'm not even going to bother. I'm not even going
The,
to
the
bother.
Livingston game, like Celtic, completely took out the equation
Aye,
because
because
I couldn't give a fuck about that game. See the Livingston game, City play against Livingston at home and have 30% possession.
yeah,
That is sackable in my opinion. Livingston are a club similar to ourselves. I'd say we're bigger than Livingston in my opinion. Livingston have only been in the division 2-3 years now.
mm.
I don't get where this Livingston or bigger team just because of recent they've been a bit more stable. I don't get that, and to go and give them the respect in which we did and only have 30% possession, not even have a touch or threat on their goal, that's diabolical in my opinion.
I think Brian Rice would have looked at that and saw that Martindale has obviously got them playing really well. I think they're 6 for 6 in the league. They're also in. I'm pretty sure they're in the semi-finals of the cup, quarterfinals of the cup. So they're obviously doing really well. I think he probably saw that as, well, they're in a really good run of form. Their confidence is sky high. We need to be careful here. But then I absolutely agree with you, where you can't go into a game, no matter how good the confidence is for the opposition at home, especially against Livingston, and have 30% possession, no touches inside their box at all, and just pumping long balls up to David Moyo and hoping something sticks. That to me is criminal, and even lining up with people like Ronnie, it gives me a headache to think as soon as somebody is out, you're looking to the bench and you're looking at youngsters. Kyle Monroe. Can we talk about Kyle Monroe, please? Because this has been blowing my mind.
Can I just stop for a minute?
Of course you can.
I've been distracted. I got a notification on my phone there.
Oh no.
George Galloway has tweeted, "My friend, the owner of Accies FC, has a brainwave. The senior football clubs have car parking, treatment rooms and medical staff, and a list of their senior supporters. Why not devolve some of the vaccination work to them? We need to step up delivery and right now." Fuck off, you cat. Fuck.
What? My friend owner. Right, let's not even talk about George because I can't. This
No,
guy's
sorry, it's just
trying to
distracted
get
me there.
involved with this. No, I know. Jesus Christ.
It just distracted me there when I saw it, man. I couldn't get it out of my head.
Yeah, it's another
Like
movie.
Kyle Monroe,
Right, Kyle Monroe. This has been blowing my mind, right? So Kyle Monroe, who, and from what I'm aware of, and I have asked online, I feel like I've got some answers, as a left back.
Mm-hmm.
And we have been playing him as an out-and-out striker, sometimes a lone striker, the last few games.
It's
and
just
I asked online, has he played there in the reserves? Has he played there for the youth? Because as far as I was aware, he was a left back. So what I've been told is that he was only played at left back because Scott McMahon was out. He is actually meant to be a left-sided or a right-sided winger. When he was on loan to Clydebank, he played down the right, and then for the Accies youth, he's played down the left. Now, that's all well and good. Well done, Kyle Monroe. But to bring him on as an out-and-out striker when you've got Tunde Owalabi sitting the bench, to me, it must. If I was Tunde Owalabi, I'm sitting there on the bench thinking, I'm not getting a chance because 18-year-old left back Kyle Monroe is getting.
See what annoys me, and I could be a million miles off it. Rice seems to have some sort of vendetta against Tunde and Justin Johnson, right? For what I can see in social media, these both are very religious folk. I don't see these being bad eggs in the camp. So this is what I don't understand. I just don't get it. They're religious. The way they come across in social media, they don't seem like bad eggs. So what they've done to shite in Brian Rice's cornflakes, I don't have a fucking clue, because some of the subs in which he makes, where they're sitting there and you're just thinking, sometimes they're not even on the bench.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand it. You would be sitting there thinking, what the fuck do I need to do? Because any glimpses we've had of Justin Johnson or Tunde when they've came on, I don't think they've looked bad when they've came on. They've certainly gave us a different dynamic and a different threat. So for them to be sitting there whilst you say you've got left winger, right winger, left back, right back, striker Kyle Monroe that was on loan at Clydebank Juniors last year in front of you, because I just wouldn't get it. I just don't understand it, man.
I don't get it either. And I saw quite a lot of fans. I'm interested in this perspective where they say that from what they've saw of Tunde Obalaba, he's not at this level, and I can see where they're coming from. Obviously, he's not scored yet, blah blah blah, but I don't think he's shown anything bad, like anything we should like give up on him and say, oh, he's not at this level.
The
Patch him
amount of
back up and
chances
to
Ronan Hughes is
Manchester.
getting, do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
For
I think
example,
that.
like how many times he's coming on.
Mhm.
That Tunde has came here from a club that it's not the best level, but he scored a fucking barrel load,
Yeah.
and a ridiculous amount of goals. Just give him a chance. Look at
Mhm.
Mikael Miller. He took a while to kick on, but you don't get to a level without playing
Yeah.
games.
Exactly.
So just compared to what we're playing now, Moyo just looks non-existent. Anything we've got up front looks non-existent. Any attacking threat looks null and void. Give him the chance, and just say we play 5 games, and it looks horrendous. Accies fans will put their hands up, say he's nowhere near the level. You were the ones that signed him. You still don't see anything in him, but just give him a fucking shot, man.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And like you said, you don't get to a level without playing the games. And I mean, when he's coming on for 10, 15 minutes end of the game when we're 4-0 down, it's not exactly helping him, is it?
No.
And when he did come on earlier on, what game was it? He came on earlier in the season and a ball came in and he was I think he was trying too hard.
St.
I
Man.
think that's St Mirren. I think that's one of the criticisms I would have of Tunde is that he tries too hard. He's constantly fouling players unnecessarily, and I think it's just because he's came from maybe a bit of a tougher league, and non-league can get away with stuff like that. But like you said, if he doesn't play, he's not going to get to this form. And after a few games, if he's shite, I'll hold my hand up and say he's shite, patch him back off. But he deserves a chance, same as Justin Johnson. Smashing takes into asked online for any fan question, anything you'd like us to discuss specifically. And one of the main ones was looking at ahead to the January transfer window. If a lot of fans saying any realistic signings you can think of, who should we get rid of, who should we bring in? And Brandon, I know you've obviously looked at quite a few names. So is any that stand out to you? Any we'd like to see us bring in?
January 1st, go and get Luke Southwood.
Back on loan,
He's not getting on the bench at the present moment with Reading. We had this conversation back at the start of the season. I says it's going to be too late before we replace the one position that we 100% need is a goalkeeper. It's not too late yet, but it's nearing that stage. Fulton hasn't cut it for me. There was always the chance he could get injured or suspended or whatnot, and we're going to have to play a sub-keeper, which Gourlay doesn't really look up too much for me either. Personally, I think he'd be better with Josh Ayrton goals. So I think I saw we were linked with a Sunderland goalkeeper.
That's literally, I'm just trying to find it now. Anthony Patterson, his name is.
Who's been gave high reviews.
20 years old, is apparently very highly rated. But as far as I'm aware, hasn't made.
I think he made one first team game and like their sort of League Cup, sort of Johnson's Plate Cup, whatever it's called these days.
Handing him his second first team appearance recently in an EFL trophy fixture away to Oldham. So he's not played a whole amount, but 20 years old.
But near the Southwood, to be fair.
Exactly. So this could be another look Southwood, but aye.
But I think a keeper is a must. We said it at the start of the season that Fulton wasn't ready to be number one, and I think he's, no offence to the guy, but I don't think he's proven himself. He doesn't command the area. He doesn't come out for the ball. He's not very vocal. Anything that's put into the box between the defence and the keeper, it's a goal.
Yeah.
And when you're an Accies keeper, you need to be of a certain level because you're going to get a lot of shots. You're going to get a lot fired at you. So I don't think Fulton is of that level. I don't think Gourley's of that level, and I don't think this other person, Scully, is of that level.
Scully's one of the names where when he was announced, Ben 1885 Ben, who does the Dunfermline channel, he obviously is kind of well aware of Scully, and he messaged me when it came in. Was like, did you guys actually sign Scully? And I was like, yeah, just as a backup. And he was like, that. Pray that he does not play for you.
I will think about it. We've signed Scully for them, and we've given them Owen Vaughan Williams, who's been fucking brilliant for them. And
I know he's suddenly become fucking Buffon.
To be fair, I thought he did get a lot of criticism. He did make a couple of mistakes, but it was certainly of a better calibre of Fulton, and that was a mistake on our side. So I think keeper is a must, and I think of the options I know of, Southwood and this Patterson, I don't know much about him. I've just read the same review or article you have. So, aye, bringing a keeper. I'd say Thomas Tierney, but the relationship between him and the club ended in a bad way. So,
Which is a shame.
and another one I would have said until December would have been McGovern, but McGovern's been starting every game
I
for
was going to say he's been
Norwich, and
doing really well at Norwich.
he's been doing brilliant. So, aye, Southwood or Patterson, but a keeper's a must.
Right.
The next sort of, obviously we've had the idea of apparently the clubs have been offered a loan.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I'm aware, and from what I've heard, the club are doing anything in their will to get money in. So, and that doesn't mean if it's going necessarily to the club or if it's going to their charities or whatnot, because I've heard different rumours. But I think the club will certainly be taking that loan, and I think, as I saw a fan mention, I think it's, if we're going to take this loan, what you need to do with it is ensure you're not spending it in a way that's going to tamper with our future, because we need to remember it's a loan, so it's going to need to be paid back. So I think invest in the team in order to stay up is a must. And I think investing it wisely and not just flirting money about just because you've given it is also ideal. So I think going down the route of raiding the Scottish Championship would be a good idea. And I think specifically raiding Raith Rovers is...
Okay, interesting.
So we all know that our midfield's pretty weak at the moment and our attack's pretty weak. A boy that used to be on our books and is having a really good time with Raith Rovers now is Danny Armstrong. Danny Armstrong's one of the top goal scorers in the league. I remember him playing with the under-20s, and I always remember there was something about him. He was fast, he was skillful, he wasn't scared to take a player on, and I think that's something we're certainly missing at the present moment. And with Raith Rovers, he's in the, I think he's scored 4 and assisted a couple as well.
I'm just trying to get his stats up now so I can get everything, but no, keep going.
So he's a player that was on our books for a very young age, and the club know him. So I think he'll be out of contract in the summer, so I don't expect him to cost much. So he's a player I'd like to go for.
He played 8 games, scored 4 and assisted 3.
So I think, and when he was with under-20s with us, he always had something about him. It was exciting to watch when I used to go to 20s matches, so he'd be a good player to bring in.
All right.
Midfield-wise, we don't seem very strong within the sort of midfield to sort of defence sort of area. 2 players are quite particularly like for Raith Rovers is Regan Hendry and Dylan Tate. Once again, we're raiding the Scottish Championship, so it's not going to cost us an arm and a leg to sign these players. Both players, Dylan Tate recently just signed a new deal with Raith Rovers, so he might be a bit dearer than what Regan Hendry would be, but Dylan Tate has been getting lots of plaudits for how well Raith are doing. If I'm correct, he's only 19-year-old.
He is,
looks very promising. So it might cost a wee bit, but I think he certainly would be a player that we would be able to sell on in the future. And I wouldn't be surprised if he does go to a bigger club in the summer, much bigger than Raith and bigger than Accies, to be honest with you. Regan Hendry was a Celtic youth player. He's been a regular with Raith Rovers for a while. He seems a sort of the main man in their midfield sort of guy. So I think he's not going to cost an arm and a leg as well. So he'd be an interesting buy. And then the final one for Raith Rovers, we're obviously missing a striker. Their striker just now seems a very Accies-esque striker.
Okay.
Manny Duku. Big number 9 up front. I think he's got an alright return. We're having to talk about realistic signings. I'm not saying this player's going to come and score and take Accies alight, but when you're talking about realistic signings,
he scored 4 goals in 6 games.
4 goals in 6 games in the Championship. Much better return than any other strikers have got. It does seem like an Accies-esque big, tall striker up top. Bullies people about, but not particularly nice and eye to watch. So I think you'd
Accies-esque, isn't it?
and very Accies realistically. Um,
That's
so that was
interesting. I just want to think. What you're saying here is brilliant. Going through the championship, seeing players that are performing well and some that can improve. Why aren't Aki's doing this more? Guys, I get like the argument of you look at the players who have came up from the championship, people like Kevin Nisbet, who obviously we were priced out immensely, and even people like Alan Forrest, who's went to Livy and is doing brilliant there. It's not as if he was out of our budget.
it's just that's what I've never understood, and it would make so much sense if Aki's sort of signing policy was that rather than signing two handfuls full of duds and hoping one of
Aye.
them's gonna kick off. It just makes no sense to me. I know we're very renowned and we like to talk about our own youth academy, which let's be honest hasn't produced much
No.
as of recent. So why not take younger, bright prospects of Scottish football, give them the platform to play, and then move them on? That's not necessarily saying anything bad about ours. And the signing policy we've got just now just doesn't work. So I think it makes so much sense to do that.
Absolutely.
Touching
So you've taken all of Wraith's players.
pretty much
Who's
taking the
next?
core of Wraith, but no, that was just a realistic couple of players we could
Absolutely is,
sign.
yeah.
I think midfield were very struggling at the present moment, and especially depth-wise. So I've looked at a few players we could possibly bring in that would make a difference. One is 25-year-old midfielder Josh Harrop from Preston.
Preston.
I think this one would make sense with our sort of signing policy. We've got Alec Neil as a friend, former manager. I'm sure he'd happy to do us a favour. I looked at the sort of Preston midfield strikers to see realistically who would be a player we could sign. Josh Harrop is a player I remember from his young days at Manchester United, because I remember him being one of the ones in Football Manager that would always kick on and be a good player. I think realistically, he's only had very small game time for Preston. He had a very promising start of a career, but it's certainly not kicked on over the recent years with Preston. Bring him in on loan. It'd certainly fit the midfield mould in which we've got just now, and I think it could only add something to the depth at least we've got, and I think he'd be a starter.
Who was the other Preston midfielder? I mean, at the start of the season, we were linked with a loan with a youngster.
Yeah, I forgot his name.
Ledson.
Ryan Ledson, that was it.
He was linked with us, but then I don't know where it came. I don't know if there was any truth to that, but that was what I heard. And then suddenly it was he was starting like for Preston and all that. I thought, well, that's not going anywhere.
The next midfielder I've got written down, realistic signing, was Kyle Jacobs from Morton. Holding midfielder from Morton. He's a championship journeyman. He's not like Trafford, as in it was a hit or miss. This Kyle Jacobs is a regular for Morton. He plays every game in that sort of midfield position. I think we're missing massively between defence and midfield. I think he'd add to the depth in which we've got, and it carries on the sort of buying from proven Scottish lower league players. Next one, which when he signed for this team, I thought there's got to be something interesting about him, and he's already proved there is. Thomas Robert for Airdrie.
Yes, the youngster, yeah.
Youngster Lauren Robert, the famous Newcastle midfielder. Thomas Robert is lighting up the League One in Scotland.
That was a weird signing, wasn't it?
Very weird, because he was linked with Bordeaux, signing a new contract with was it Bordeaux or a big Montpellier? It was a big French team anyway. And he was linked with German teams, etc. But he went to Airdrie, so a lot of people raised their eyes at him. He's been doing unbelievable for Airdrie, scoring straight for corners and everything. He's been linked with Celtic already. He's been linked with Rangers. He's been linked with Hibs. Just go sign him in January, and even if he's not ready for the sort of Premier League football, he's clearly shown that he's got something of a certain level, and his dad was phenomenal. His dad was different. I remember I used to watch Newcastle when I was a wee guy, and some of Robert's free kicks was just different class. He would offer us something going forward. He's not going to cost us an arm and leg. Aye, he's Scottish League One. He's obviously staying local. Go sign Thomas Roberta now. It would be my cry to Accies. That's my main one. I want Accies to sign. Please go sign
That's your
Thomas.
main target, is him?
Well, I think keepers are main.
Yeah, but he's
He's the
main.
one, realistically, I think, just go and sign him before he becomes a player of a different level. And the final midfielder I've got, which I was a bit unsure about because I'm not sure if he's playing every game for Hearts, Peter Haring.
Right, okay. I'm sure he was injured for a long time.
So I'm not sure if he's playing a lot or what his circumstances is, but I know they've got Andy Halliday in the exact same position.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking he's a holding midfielder. He bosses the midfield about. If he's not particularly getting a game all the time, whether it's down to injuries or not with Hearts, he'll add to our depth, and we just need to the position. I just think that midfield to defence right now is non-existent, especially when you've got Scott Martin injured, and a Dauphin as well, because you can use a Dauphin for. You're going to have to use a Dauphin in different roles.
Yeah.
You can't just simply just play him in that holding midfield role. So we're going to need to have a player in that position, and that Peter Haring was a sort of option I thought.
Yeah, I can tell you, he's
down.
only played 6 games so far this season, and just looking at the stats here, the last 4 games, he's not been in the squad for one, and he's only played about 20 minutes in the last.
So
3.
I think it would sort of make sense. He might want first team football. Accies could offer him it.
I think the big problem with Pete Hang will be
wages
wage-wise. I think obviously Hearts will be paying more than we will.
Aye, no, 100%. And then that leads us on to strikers, which we 100% need. I think Robert would add something different to our attacking prowess, but a striker is what we need. I've obviously already mentioned Manny Duku, which I think is a more than realistic signing. I don't think he's any spectacular, but with the Aki's mould, he would work, and we just need to see how he works. Other strikers I've got down here, I've got a Benjamin House, who currently plays with Eastleigh, Scotland under 21. Played 2 games for Scotland under 21s. He's currently, I think, 3rd in the English Conference top goal scorer list.
Right.
I can't imagine
another kind of
another sort of. Is just. I'm just going with there's so many other players I'd rather sign, but I'm just going with the sort of realistic signings. I think he's obviously got some sort of Scottish connection because he's played with under 21s. He's still young. He scored a handful of goals for Eastleigh. Aye, it sort of makes sense for Accies to sign him. Right. The next one was a similar sort of idea as what is it? Tom Denton, 31-year-old, very tall striker who is a very consistent goal scorer in the English lower leagues. He's currently one of the top goal scorers in the conference again. Looking at his stats, similar to Steve Davis, just constantly, constantly scoring in the English lower leagues. So it would make sense if it was an Accies type of signing. It's realistic as well. It'd certainly add goals to our side. Another one which I've went down an Accies sort of realistic signing route was a player called Will Swan. He's currently the under 23 top goal scorer with Nottingham Forest, which adds into the Brian Rice connection. He seems to be on the bench fairly regular for the first team of Nottingham Forest, but not actually coming on because the striker options they've got are quite a good list of strikers Nottingham Forest have got, but he is the top goal scorer in the under 23 league. So
interesting.
I don't see why we couldn't get him on loan.
It looks as if he's on loan already.
Will Swan?
To Truro City? Is that last year?
I think that was last year, mate.
Was that last year?
I think that was last year, mate. Aye, because he's been on the. Aye, no, that was last year. Because I was looking at the players. Because I was thinking about the Nottingham Forest connection. Because I know what we were like with signing strikers on loan.
Exactly.
So I thought realistically it makes sense. He clearly knows how to score a goal if he's scoring for under 23s. But then I suppose it could also work in the same favour. Which his name. Adeoyen, whatever his name was, for Everton that we signed. But no, Will Swan. And then someone gave me this suggestion, which I think you could make an argument whether it's realistic or not.
Okay.
Greg Stewart. It's a tough one because
Yeah.
he done well at Kilmarnock. He then moved to Aberdeen. And he then moved to Rangers, and he's been completely non-existent, even on their bench or their
Yeah.
Europa League squads, etc. You'd think that there would be a bigger club than us
Aye,
that would
exactly.
go in for him, but I wouldn't say it's completely unrealistic because it would only be a loan, and with this sort of loan we've been given money-wise, it could add value because we know that he's a player, and I think he'll stay in Scotland, but it's whether who he goes to. I'd
That's
maybe say
interesting. That's interesting.
I think we could possibly see him going to Ross County. I think they've got the money, and I think if they lose Ross Stewart in January, I think Greg Stewart would be a ready-made up replacement. But I think Greg Stewart would be a great signing for us.
You know,
But
listen, I think he'd be a great signing. I never thought of Greg Stewart. I thought he'd be a great signing, but again, I think I agree with you in terms of if he's going to leave Rangers, which I think he probably should for his career. I can see him going to either somewhere with more money, like a Ross County, or I can maybe even see him doing like a swan song back to Kelly. See with the way they're no
but
scoring goals.
we're not leaps and bounds far apart
No,
for
I
him. So
know.
why can we not just go and give? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He
Oh,
comes to
Greg
just
Stewart's
say he
interesting.
comes to us in a short loan. He comes to us in a short loan. He scores a handful of goals, keeps us up. He then gets a move to
Aye.
a Hibs when they lose Nisbet. Let's say, do you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
That's
So,
interesting.
and then the final two players I went back down the route of the sort of lower Scottish leagues
Right.
was Deck McManus with Dunfermline, who's the
Fairman,
current
yep.
top goal scorer. Deck McManus, I remember watching as a young player. I'm sure he was at Aberdeen. He then get a move to Fleetwood down south because he scored goals at Morton and then came back. He was at Morton, he was at Falkirk, he was at Dunfermline. He's a bit of a journeyman. He clearly knows how to score goals. Realistically, we probably could sign him. He's having a bit of a good season with Dunfermline now, so he'd probably cost us a wee bit of a fee. But when you're having to think about realistic signings and who we should be going for, then I don't see anything wrong with going for a player like that.
I remember David, who obviously runs OnlyAccies. He told me at the start of the season that apparently Accies were looking at Declan McManus because I think he was without a club. I think we were getting him for free, before he went to Dunfermline. But the kind of rumor is that I think this is his second spell at Dunfermline or something. He's been there
Aye.
before, and so from what we kind of heard was we were interested, but he favoured going back to the club he already knew. But after he's kicked off a good start to the season, don't see why not.
And then Mitch Megginson with Cove Rangers. Started off his career at Aberdeen. He's been at Cove for some seasons now. Cove have really not been exactly, and they're in League One now. They were in League Two beforehand, and they were obviously a junior club before that. And he scored nearly them. I think he scored like 118 goals in 122 games. So he's
Right.
nearly scored a goal every game. So he knows how
Yeah.
to score a goal. He's been playing with a club that have been far superior to his opposition, but he clearly knows how to score a goal. Whether they'd move down this sort of south of Scotland, if you will, or the sort of where we are in Scotland, because Cove Rangers, he's been up at Aberdeen. It looks as if he's probably got a family up there, but realistically, he's not going to cost us a lot of money, and maybe want to prove he's still in the Scottish Premiership. So I don't see why not going for him.
Interesting. That's a good list, man. It's a good list. A
So
lot
that's
of realistic. I think there are some in there that I think would be priced out of, people like Peter Heading and that. But yeah, this is where we've talked about. I don't understand why Accies don't like go and push into the Championship more, because you're not spending a lot of money down there. It's an incentive for those players to see if they can make that step up to the Premiership, see if they can do it. And realistically, if it doesn't go well, you pat them off. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
exactly.
yeah, I'm
And I
happy
think
with all
I
that.
know that list. I think it's a mixture of.
We should get this obviously out today and send. We should email it to Alan Maitland. Don't
I
worry,
don't see.
we've done your January work for you.
We've done your
Here's your
January work
list.
for you then. Go and have a look at them and see if you can afford them.
Here's
Exactly.
the list.
But I think if we make up this list and sort of put it on our page, I think it'll give people more an in-depth look at our avenues in which we could go down and what it would make sense realistically for us to sign. And other listeners can give their views and possible similar signings which could do it. And
Absolutely.
what's the worst that's going to do? It's just going to, at least we're putting these type of players in the face of the club to make them realise what type of signings we think are realistic and what we'd be happy with. Because any player I've mentioned there, I'm not saying I'd be over the moon with half of them, but I think with what we're working with, we can easily go and get these players. So why we're not, and we're not just taking these sort of lumps of luck on absolute guff that are not working out. Because if all these players as a whole, the amount of money we could be investing in a couple that would make so much sense for the depth of the squad rather than just absolute junk. It's makes sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good list. Like we said, if you agree, disagree with any of them, let us know in the comments below. Obviously, comment any suggestions, and we'll put up a fair few of these on Twitter as well. You can have your say there too, but make sure and tweet us. All the links are in the description. And one of the other questions we got asked on Facebook was, and again, it's in the same light of the transfer we just went through, why did we never sign any players on pre-contract? Because that's planning ahead for the future, isn't it? I mean, how many times do you see clubs jumping out and saying, we've signed a player in a P-contract in the summer, he'll join up with the squad and he'll be ready for next season. We never seem to have that. We seem to get to the end of the season and we lose a handful of players and then we're stuck scrambling for who to bring in last minute.
I've met in past years, like this is a long time ago. I remember we done it with Derek Lyle, who was at Dundee at the time, who was the top goal scorer in League One. We signed him on a pre-contract. Dundee fans were raging, and I don't understand why we don't do it. I think it's possibly the uncertainty of where we're going to be.
Yeah,
and at the end of the season, I think we're just because we all know how unambitious the Accies board seem to be. They've done a great job for his eye, but how ambitious they seem to be, happy with just sitting at this floating just above the water sort of mantra. So it could be the case they're unwilling to sign people in pre-contracts. They're unwilling to sign their own players on actual contracts until they have a better knowledge of what they're going to be, where we're going to be. But it's just very unambitious in my opinion. Even if you sign these players in a pre-contract, that you should be signing people because you think they're going to improve what you've currently got and they're possibly something for the future, etc. So I just don't understand it with Accies. They sign these couple of handfuls of players and it seems as if they're just using the same agent over and over again. So I don't know if it's because of a connection with an agent or whatnot, and they're just hoping some of them are able to kick on. But I certainly think pre-contract is a good way to go about things because you're beating rivals to players and you're planning ahead. And it seems to me, although we always do it again, we stay up, we always have horrendous starts to the season. If we had a better start to the season, we wouldn't be in the predicament we're in just now. And by having the knowledge of what we're going to have at our disposal for the new season, it can only be a good thing.
I think a lot of Accies fans want to see planning. We want to see that we're going into the next season not crossing our fingers that we managed to bring somebody in and not being in this position where in January we're desperately trying to get people in.
Because look as if we signed AJ Gogic and gave them a respectable deal that they were wanted, I'm sure they'd have more than happily signed a contract. But we offered them absolute guff because we didn't know what the situation was going to be in the new season. And we can see how well Gogic is doing. Even players like Miller,
Adam McGowan's starting to kick on now.
Adam McGowan's kicking on. Mikael Miller playing down south. George Oakley. It's this way about Accies where I've always felt it. You don't know what you've got until it's gone with Accies fans. They're very easy to criticise players, but then compared to what you've currently got to what they were, you don't know what you've got till it's lost.
I mean, I saw the We Are Hamilton tweet about us celebrating against Motherwell. That's what they said.
And I think that corresponds in with someone's question about the lack of sort of leaders we've got at the present moment. And I'm not necessarily saying Gogic was a massive leader, McGowan was a massive leader, etc. But they certainly did have the credentials to be leaders, and they had the voices, and they certainly understood what it meant to us fans and what games meant, and understand to have that fight. And you'll struggle to find many players in our squad just now that do that. Some of them just seem happy to be there to get a wage and not understand the
Yeah.
whole sort of fighting element of Hamilton Accies and what we are as a club as such.
Yeah, because I totally agree obviously with Brian Easton being our captain, and I think we've saw I would say a bit of improvement with Adam Martin coming in where he's been a loud voice and trying to dictate that play. But like you said, and like Hamilton said, you don't know what it's got until it's gone. I mean, Gogic and Adam McGowan, like you've just said, they may not have been massive leaders, but I mean, when you saw them on the pitch, you saw them scream
You
and
know they were
command,
there.
and
You know what I
you
mean? You
don't
know
you
they were
don't
there.
see those voices. I mean, when Scott McMahon was given captaincy, he's the quietest man on the pitch. And when I interviewed him for the podcast at the start of the season, he was quiet even off the pitch. Like he doesn't seem to me like that kind of player, that kind of guy who's going to get in your face and tell you how bad it's been and try and improve you and try and encourage you to do better. I mean, Dougie Imrie, we criticised a hell of a lot at the end of his career, not tracking back and causing more issues than solving problems. But what he did bring was that he knew what it meant to play in derbies. He knew what it meant to play for the club, and he made sure that everybody else knew what it meant.
And I think when
So
you
we're missing
lack in depth the way this squad does, and the ability's not possibly there very much, and you need to make up for it with leaders and people that understand and know, and we don't have any of that, and that's what's adding to the sort of lack of depth in squad, lack of ability in squad, and lack of leadership, and it's just not all going to end well at all when you've got none of the credentials. But we are seeing slight improvements compared to what we were 6 games ago. We all thought everything was doom and gloom. I'm not saying everything's brilliant just now because it's far from that, but at least we're not in the situation we were before. We're going into January. We've got a chance to bring in recruits. Hopefully they use the money, if they do take this loan wisely. They recruit well. They don't just bring in absolute guff. And we kick on because I personally don't think we're the worst team in that league just now. When you look at Ross County, their confidence, they might have better players, but their confidence is null and void. I think we can kick on if we bring in a few good players, and I think if we look at realistic targets for the money we're going to bring in with this sort of loan, I think it's pivotal that we invest it well in the areas we need to stay up.
I think that ends us quite nicely. Thank you very much for listening to the OnlyAccies podcast. We will have one just in the new year to review our 2020 and we're more in depth of what's been going on at Hamilton. And there will be, hopefully, a very interesting announcement, a big announcement for Accies fans from OnlyAccies, and it'll be for those who maybe weren't as happy with the club shop this Christmas. Thank you very much for listening. If you did enjoy, go ahead and leave a comment down below. Be sure to subscribe, and you can follow us on our social medias, all of which are linked in the description. From yesterday, I feel like I'll never know.